brilliant conclusion, never having gone to school in his life. A lot of things happened in my relationship with Domingo that indicated to me that he had been ordained of God before he was even born to this job. And here I am, a kid growing up in southwest Wisconsin. Little Slide graduated with 18 kids in my class in high school. 1956, some of you are old enough to remember a story that came out in Life magazine January of that year about 5 missionaries that were killed in the country of Ecuador. Jim Elliott, Nate Saint, Ed McCauley, Roger Udarian. Those were some of the names. And I read the stories that came out about them, and it just really broke me. It just humbled me. And I was just really impressionable, and so I kind of wanted to become a missionary. When I was 15 years of age, now in the middle of high school, I went to summer camp in northern Wisconsin. And while I was there, there was a missionary speaker from India. This guy was 6'6", about 250 pounds. He was a basketball player in college, played for William and Mary, a small school, but he was a small school All-American. And he was fortunate enough to be offered a contract by the old Minneapolis Lakers. Now we're going back sometime now. $10,000 contract to play basketball for the Minneapolis Lakers. A lot of money in 1959. But he turned it down. And part of his testimony was he turned down a contract to play basketball to go to seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary, to prepare himself to be a missionary. And I was into sports, and that was my life. And this guy blew me away with his commitment to Christ. And he called us on Friday night. There was 120 kids sitting around this campfire on Friday night. And he said this. He said, now, God has something very unique and special in mind for every one of you young people. And he wants you to accomplish that in your lifetime. It's a ministry that he has in mind for you to do. And every one of you is called to do that. And he says, tonight I'd like you to make a radical commitment to Christ, wherein you take your hands off of your life and you allow Jesus Christ to make decisions for you. And he will. And that challenged me. I was challenged because every night, the camp director, for some reason, let a bunch of us jocks, okay, stay up and play basketball with that guy. I mean, and we divide up into teams and play 21, and he was whipping up on us every night. And we were just blown away by the quality of this man who had committed himself to missions. And so there was 12 of us guys that played basketball with him almost every night that week that walked forward at the end of that service, picked up a stick and threw it on the fire and said, we want our lives to burn out for Jesus Christ. Well, that might sound kind of, trite or squeamish or whatever. But that's how it was. And that night, my life was changed. I read the books about Jim Elliott, how he'd gone to a particular college in Illinois, and I wanted to go to that college. I wanted to be a missionary. And it was just burning in me, so I went and prepared myself in anthropology and linguistics. And when I was 27, on the mission field for 2 years, I got a letter from my dad. In that letter, my father said, I'm the oldest, Billy, before you were born. When we knew that Mom was pregnant with you, I put my hands on Mom's belly. And I dedicated you to the Lord. And I even remember saying, Lord, if you want him on the mission field away from us, that's fine. That's your call. But we give him to you. So that there's been, this pull, and there's, how many times I came to the brink of doing things that would have absolutely ruined and destroyed any possibility that I could be in ministry. Right up to the brink. And for some reason, I was pulled back. I attribute that to my mom's prayers and my dad's counsel in my life. But God calls people. I flunked German in college. And I go to another country where there's an unwritten language. The requirement is that you have to deduce from all of the sounds letters and assign letters to these different sounds and take the document to the president of the country of Guatemala in order to have approval to begin to translate and to publish in that language. It wasn't even a language, an official language in the country of Guatemala in 1968. I don't know how to say this, but God equips the called supernaturally so that the glory and the honor are His alone. There's nothing that I ever brought to the table to be able to do this. I have a copy today of what was dedicated this past February. It's the entire Bible in the dialect of 117,000 Quiche Indians who did not have an alphabet in 1968. We had to come out of Guatemala in 1983 because of the violence in the country. There was a civil war going on, and the communist guerrillas wanted the right to wave the banner exclusively of the people who were helping the poor. And every missionary was targeted that was anywhere near the zone of conflict. And we were right in the middle of the zone of conflict. You know, our church lost 43 pastors. Our denomination in Guatemala lost 43 pastors. Because the missionaries had instructed the national pastors to be neutral in the whole situation. Well, the guerrillas would come into the villages and they would say, and they would target the leaders of the community. The leaders in the community were the pastors. They were the most well-educated. They were the most savvy of the people, and they were the people that commanded respect in the communities. And so the guerrillas wanted them to be leaders in the guerrilla movement to overthrow the government. And they would talk like that to them, and our pastors would say, no, I can't join with you, and I can't join the other side. You know, that's not what God has called us to do. We're here to preach and teach the Word of God. Well, the guerrillas would accuse them of being part of the government side, and the government would accuse them of being part of the guerrilla side, and so both sides were killing the pastors because they refused to join either one of the sides. And many people were killed. There's missionaries that were killed as well in the country of Guatemala. And our denomination was wise enough, I believe, to alert all of us to come out of the country so that hopefully we could go back to the country after the civil strife subsided. I was in a municipal building in 1980, and I was showing a film of the life of Christ out of Campus Crusade. I had done the translation for the Quiche part of it. And we were going to show it in the municipal building, and I turned the lights off. We were about 7 minutes into the film when I felt this cold steel object in my back. And this little tiny man whispered into my ear, "We know where your children are. We're giving you 48 hours to leave town." And so that's when we left Guatemala. At that time, there was about 250 believers amongst the people. We already had part of the New Testament, and the process of the growth of the church was simply, I would take what I had translated that day to meetings every evening in different homes in the village, and I would read what I had translated that day, and while I'm getting feedback from the translation and their questions, I'm correcting it as I'm going through to make it better. So that was the checks for the translations that we did. And every night we had meetings. And we had a little guitar, and we played guitar, and they sang songs that were translated into their dialect. And that was the beginning of the church. Well, by the time we left in 1983, there were 250 people that had made a commitment to Christ. About 80 or 90 of them now were baptized. I had not yet completed the translation of the New Testament when we were forced to leave. Wycliffe Bible translators wrote a letter to the president of my mission board inviting our family back so that I could conclude the translation of the New Testament, and that happened in 1984. I walked out of Wycliffe's offices August 22nd. I'll never forget it because it's my parents' anniversary. August 22nd.